Alright guys, welcome back to the Viking Dev channel. This is where I'm going to be going over all things development, security, and fun stuff like that. If you are just checking out this channel for the first time, basically I started this channel as a place to research security topics. I am personally an information security professional, but I started branching it out into development work relatively recently. I think the last video before this one that I recorded was kind of that pivot over to development work. So if you want to check out all things API development, I am currently working on a scraper course that should be released in like 9 days. So check out the channel for a little bit more information about that. Feel free to subscribe. That's going to let you know when that course goes live and when I upload any other kind of material. But this video is all about APIs. So APIs are application program interfaces. And basically, they are for when you've got a situation like this, where you've got a server or a virtual machine or what have you that has all of your data on it. And you want to access that data, and you want to allow other developers to access that data, perhaps. Like maybe it's just something that you're using. But in this situation, let's just say that you're wanting to access the data yourself, and you're not wanting to do it through a query language. So things like SQL, things like Postgres, things like MongoDB, and different database technologies have different ways of querying data. They've got different ways that you build those queries up in order to query all of your data and find data, order it, and analyze that data. If instead of just writing queries for your data, it's kind of inefficient. You're having to write each and every single query, even though you're probably like repeating the same query multiple times if you're trying to access the same data. You may want to access that data a little bit easier by making a call to a particular API endpoint. We'll talk about what endpoints are later on, but basically what APIs are meant to do is they are meant to make you or the user able to access the data a bit easier, and you do it either through a query language, which is kind of the old-fashioned way. Basically, you are sending direct queries to the database, and you are communicating through that query language. That's how you do it without an API. So you are writing manual queries here. So select star from, let's say your table's name is foo, where blah, blah, blah. So you're having to write those out for every single query that you're trying to make. Or perhaps you've got like a very easy query formatter that you've written. There are a couple of different ways that you could have done this. But instead, with an API, let me erase this here. With an API, the situation is different, and it's much, much easier. Instead, with an API, you were traditionally building out an API with HTTP endpoints. So with an API, the way that you're making these requests are usually via HTTP. I'm sure there are other ways that you can build APIs, but your typical API framework, so things like Express, things like Flask, those are the two big API frameworks that you use to develop APIs in Python with Flask and Express with JavaScript. You're going to build those to respond to HTTP requests. So GET requests, so GET/users. That's how one would look, and post/tweet. So it's much, much easier to make an HTTP request. Your browser does it all the time. And that's why APIs they majorly simplify access to data. Instead of writing a custom query or writing a query formatter for all of these different situations, you put the query formatter or you put the querying interface on the API so that the user is just having to make these API calls via HTTP. So basically the way that's going to look is you can do it with a browser. You can use things like curl. So curl is one way. wget is another way. You can use Postman, which is a very common way to test APIs and to interact with APIs. or you can just use your browser. And all of these are methods that you can use to send these HTTP requests to an API. So GET requests are the common ways to do it, post requests, and what those do is they're going to hit endpoints. And all endpoints are, you can basically think of them as a web page. So if I'm going to Twitter and I go over to my user profile, so twitter.com/Viking_sec, that is me going to that profile. If I go to that profile and I see somebody else's tweets, there's a problem. If I go to that profile and I don't see anything, I probably said something stupid and got banned off of Twitter or got a timeout or something like that. With API endpoints, every single endpoint is essentially a web page. So let's say we've got a user's endpoint. That is a web page that is going to return information about users. And depending on how the API endpoint is built out, it's going to tell you what kind of information that you're going to get from that endpoint. So let's say with this user's endpoint, let me clear up a little bit of room here. Let's say with this user's endpoint, I'm going to hit that user's endpoint and I'm going to pass it parameters. So if I send a GET request, so GET/users, there are two different ways that I could potentially send data. I could send it in the URL. So that is typically done by putting a question mark next to the URL and then saying, let's say username, name equals Viking_sec. And that is going to make the call to the user's API endpoint, in this case, and it is going to pass this as a parameter. And then on the API side, so over here, this is going to be the user side, and this is going to be the API side. On the API side, it is going to take that request, so def, let's just say users. This is going to be the function that defines that endpoint, and it's going to take that username as a parameter. So username equals request.username. So that's, obviously not real code, but that is essentially how you would do it. And then it's going to do a bunch of stuff with that username, and it's going to return an object. Typically, some web pages are set to just return a 200 status code if it succeeded. And basically what that means is if, say, I'm posting data, and what posts are usually used for is sending data along. So you'll usually send a post to /tweet, for example. And the body of that post is going to contain the data that, let's say you've got your API token, which is used to authenticate. So it's very, very similar to a password, but it's just a very long string. And that's going to be how the API actually figures out who exactly you are and what you're allowed to do. And that's this big long string right here running out of room. And then let's say you've got your tweet, and it's just a big dumb thing that you probably shouldn't be saying on the internet. And that's going to make up the body of your API call. And when you call that API endpoint, it's going to take that API token and say, okay, this is Viking_sec on Twitter, and here's the dumb thing that he wants to put in a tweet. And then it's going to tweet that, and the thing that it sends back might just be a status code that says, hey, HTTP 200 means that this succeeded. It might send back a body, another object that says, hey, this failed for this reason. You said something incredibly dumb, and we didn't want to let you actually post that via our API. You're going to have to log in, and you're going to have to type it all out yourself to confirm that you actually want to say something that dumb on Twitter. So that's kind of how an API could work. All of this is very theoretical right now. Obviously, we're just whiteboarding this stuff out, and I'm kind of explaining how it works. So let's step back and recap a little bit. I'm actually going to go ahead and erase everything here, and let's start fresh. So an API is going to have endpoints, and those are basically those web pages that you are going to use HTTP calls to access. So we talked about /users. /tweets, etc. Then you've got API tokens. And I didn't explain it super well a second ago, but API tokens are basically these big long strings that the API provider will give you that basically says, hey, instead of your username and password that you use to log into the site typically, so let's keep running with the Twitter example. You've got your Twitter, username and password that you use to log in. With the API, instead of logging in using your username and password, we're going to give you an API token. API token. And with every single request that you make, you're going to pass this API token somehow. Usually it's going to be in the body. So even with a GET request that typically doesn't really need the body as much, you're still going to have a body, and it's going to have the API token, and that's going to be a big long string of random letters and numbers, hopefully, or it's going to be something stupid that's going to end up getting hacked and you shouldn't use that service. And you're going to have your username. And basically on the back end, the API is going to make sure that that username matches up with that API token, just like it would with your password. And if both of those things match up, then you can continue doing whatever it was that you were doing. So your API token is essentially the password for your API. It is how you authenticate with the API. Your endpoints are going to make up the brains of the API if you're the developer, and they're going to make up the muscle of the API if you're the person interacting with the API. So if you're interacting with the API, if this is you and you're very happy right here, and you're just having a grand old day because you write scripts that interact with APIs and that for some reason makes you happy. If you are the user and you're interacting with the API, you're going to use GET requests and POST requests. And those are two of the most common HTTP request methods. There are also puts and deletes and stuff like that. Typically, you won't see them in public-facing APIs. You can develop them yourself, and I have done it before. But GET and POST are going to be the two most common ones. GET usually does exactly what it says. It is more geared towards fetching data. So you're still going to send that data along. You're still going to send your API token along very, very frequently, either in the POST body or, like we said, so users, if you're getting the user's endpoint, then API equals this big long string of letters and numbers. So that is one way that you can send it along. You can also send it along in the request body. POST is typically used to send data. That is not always the case. Sometimes you will have API calls that are essentially just used to get data, and they use POST for a variety of different reasons. One of them being basically POST typically uses this body a lot more. So let's say POST to the tweets or POST to the tweet endpoint, and you're going to have your body of your request down here. So here you'll have your API key, and it's this big long string, and then you'll have your tweet, that big long string that you shouldn't be posting on Twitter because it's dumb and all of Twitter is dumb. And then you've got, you maybe can like. That's another thing that you can do with a POST endpoint. So there are a billion different APIs. Every single company has, either one or more API. You can develop your own APIs, and that is going to be what we talk about later on this channel. We're going to be developing APIs. We're going to be interacting with APIs. APIs are basically what has made up most of my career, either in developing them or interacting with them. And if you learn how APIs work, you learn how to develop them, you can better learn how to interact with them and vice versa. So if you've ever worked with an API, you probably know different things about that API that didn't work, that were dumb. And trust me, I get you. I've worked with them before too. It happens all the time. And you're going to build dumb APIs. I guarantee it. If you've worked with dumb code, you're going to write dumb code. That's just, we all do it. So later on, basically in the next couple of videos probably on this channel, we're going to be talking more about APIs, how to develop them. I'm going to probably do a separate series on Flask and a series on Express because those are the two that I'm the most familiar with. Probably Node as well, because I've done that a little bit to write out APIs. So we'll talk about that a lot, and I'm very excited about that. This whiteboarding session is fun, but I like to get my hands dirty with an IDE. So y'all take it easy. If you're excited about that kind of content, go ahead and subscribe, hit that bell, and that will let you know when I actually upload those videos. They'll be coming fairly soon because it's very relevant to what I've been working on recently anyways. So take it easy, and thank you for watching.